there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we're going to make this 2-page spread wrapping up the last 2 days of World Watercolor Month. And if you'd like a real-time version of this tutorial, live narrated, you can find it up now in Critique Club. Critique Club has over 150 real-time mixed media lessons and lots of creative inspiration. And I post 2 new tutorials and a new creative prompt every single month. So I'll have a link in the video description. It's $7.50 a month if you want to check it out. And thank you so much for watching. So let's get on with the time lapse here. I'm starting off by sketching with a General's Scribe All pencil. Now I've never really used this pencil much other than to just doodle around with it in a sketchbook. I picked it up at a local art shop and I was really curious about it because it marks on all surfaces and it's water soluble. So I think it's probably similar to the Stabilo All pencil if you've ever used those. I think it's available in black and white. That's what I bought at the art store. And I did see a 2-pack on Amazon that's just the black and white. I didn't see it at Blick for some reason, but they probably have them in store if you're lucky enough to have an art store in your area. Anyway, it's kind of a waxy feeling pencil, but it's very soft, it's quite dark, and I thought this might be kind of fun to do my sketch with and then wash it out with water and then go in with fine liners. Now, the advantage to this pencil, I will say it doesn't completely wash out. So, you know, sometimes when you're sketching with a water-soluble graphite or a watercolor pencil, you can lose your marks a little too easily. With this, your marks do remain a bit more. So it doesn't, I think it's just like a little bit waxier, so it doesn't completely wash out. But I do find that my watercolors stick fine on top. It doesn't create a resist or anything. So jury's out on this pencil, whether, you know, I'm going to love it or not, but I think it shows a lot of promise and it's definitely something fun. And, you know, sometimes if you're like me and you have a lot of supplies, sometimes you're looking for something that you haven't tried yet when you're in an art store and you just want, you know, that little dopamine hit of a cheap little buy that you can, you know, play with and try. And that's what this did for me. And I do find that General's makes a pretty good pencil. They are made in the USA, which is nice because we don't really have any, we don't have a lot of art pencil manufacturers. I think since Prismacolor moved their operations to Mexico, we don't really have any color pencil makers here. They don't do color pencils, but they do a pastel and a watercolor pencil. But they do have some nice graphic pencils, and they're very affordable. So I thought I'd give this a try and see how I got on with it. Another option, if you didn't want the lines, if you want to be able to have a water-soluble line that would be permanent once dry, would be the Derwent Inktense. So you could definitely use that in place of this. You could really use any sort of water-soluble pencil that you'd like. And you could see how much pigment there is there once I dissolve it, but you can also see that my lines are still there. Now, I tried to be fairly accurate, but it wasn't detailed. I was just trying to get the basic colors down, kind of like the wash then line technique where you do like a watercolor painting, you kind of block things in and then you go in with a fine liner after. That's what I wanted to do here because I don't have a lot of experience doing architecture. That's not something I generally gravitate to, although it is something I want to get better at. So I figured last 2 days of World Watercolor Month, let's challenge ourselves and go with something like that. Now, I've been really into doing triads lately, like picking 3 colors and just mixing everything from that. And so I went with New Gamboge, and these are the Phoenix watercolors, which, my goodness, they remind me so much of Winsor & Newton professional watercolors. These are the ones in the black tin, not the ones in the blue tin. The ones in the blue tin that they sell and the ones in the plastic tins, those are very identical to the Winsor & Newton Common range, but this professional range by Phoenix really mimics the Winsor & Newton professional range, so much so that I kind of wonder if they may start manufacturing Winsor & Newton's professional range. I have no intel on that, but boy, it wouldn't surprise me if they were. But look at this beautiful, almost quinacridone gold color you get when you mix the magenta with the New Gamboge from them. And then I just used cobalt teal because I thought it would give us kind of that little old building, old metal patina feeling to it. And I think it does. So after getting that wash on and letting it dry, I got some really pretty granulation there with the cobalt teal. I decided to do some stamping. So I went into my stash of stamps and I just grabbed anything that I thought would be kind of architectural, be kind of grungy, just kind of give some kind of vintage graphic elements. And so I went with this set by Tim Holtz that had this like kind of like sunbeam, I don't know what you call that. It's kind of sunray design and circle design. And then I had a couple other circles that I think are from Patty Tolish Perry. Patty Patty Tolley Parrish, I think that's her name. She does some stencil designs and stuff, and I had some of her rubber stamps. They're just kind of like elements, so I figured kind of mixing those, they worked really well together. And when I'm storing my stamps, I store them in binders, like the kind of binders you would have loose leaf notebook paper in, and I have page protectors, and I group things by how I would use them. So these were pretty much all in a binder that's just design elements. And when I want stuff like that, that's where I go for. This really big background is from Paper Artsy, and I keep that with I have a big wooden crate that's just background stamps, and I keep all them together. So I think it's really important when you are looking at your stash of supplies to store them how you would use them. Otherwise, they're not going to get used. I am not joking when I say I have a massive collection of rubber stamps. I collect two things in this world. I collect rubber stamps, and I collect mini travel watercolor tints. Those are my two big collections. Yes, I have a big art supply collection, but those two things in particular, I'm always looking to add to, even though I don't really need more of those products. If I can find something that's going to expand the collection, not necessarily duplicate it, especially in the form of rubber stamps. I mean, watercolors are watercolors. I just like the different palettes. I don't know. I collect them. They're fun. They're fun to collect. Some people collect thimbles and tablespoons and, commemorative plates. I collect travel watercolor tins. Anyway, but it's a collection that I enjoy having, looking at, and using. So now I'm using these sepia fine liners by Bienyo. I cannot recommend these enough. I've been using this set for about a year, and I love them so much that last Cyber, they had like the Black Friday sale on Amazon. I bought a second set, and I'm like, I might give these away. I might keep them. I love these so much that they would make either a perfect gift or a spare set, and I'm not sure if I gave them away or not, but because I'm still using the first set that I bought, and they have so much ink in them, and there's like 12 pens, I think. And you have your regular fine liners, you have a couple felt tip brush pens, and then you have a couple plastic tip brush pens, which that's what I'm using right here is the medium plastic tip pen. There's also a small. And then I think this is such a nice arrangement. The nib size match micron nib sizes quite well if you're used to those. Sometimes you'll get a set of off-brand fine liners and their sizes are a size or two off, which isn't a huge deal because you usually get a bunch of them. But this I find to be quite straight on, and I love the neutral dark brown sepia tone here. Sometimes when you buy a sepia, it's very orangey, but this is a nice neutral dark brown. I really like these. You can also get a plastic nib. It's called the PN series. It's a very similar pen to this through Micron. Just look for the PN version, and you can find those open stock in art stores. And if you're lucky enough, like I said, you're lucky enough to an art store, that's a great object to pick up there. Obviously you do run the risk of things being open and tested in store, but I've never really had a problem with that because that's always a fun little treat to pick up a new pen, right? So one thing you can do with these pens, especially the brush nib ones, because they have so much ink and they take a while to dry, is while they're still wet, you can pull the color around with a wet brush. And that's what I'm doing here. So I'm making a line or a line or two, and I'm going in with a wet brush, just water, and I'm dragging the color around. That's a great way to get some shadows blocked in. So I have in Critique Club, this I'll link this reference photo too. It's from Unsplash. There was a few different pictures of this building. It's in New York somewhere, and different photographers had taken photos of it, and the photo I used for the sketching the building was the one with a lot of contrast, and the one I used for sketching the statue was one that was a little more lit, and I zoomed in on it. So this was from a detail from a bigger painting, but the two prompts, tower and ornate, I thought would just go really well together. So I took a detail, an ornate sculpture, and I did that for ornate, the detail there. And then for tower, I used the more backed up picture of the building. So I thought that was kind of a fun way to do a 2-page spread. I like to do that sometimes. I'll do kind of an overall picture of something like I was in Malone, New York a couple of years ago for the Inktober retreat, and there was this stone church really close to the retreat venue, and I did a painting on one page of the spread of just the building, and then on the next page I did little details from around the building, which is kind of difficult in real life, honestly, unless you're getting really close to the building to see well enough of the details. When you have a photo, you can zoom right in, which is kind of nice, but it's a really fun way to do a sketchbook spread, because I find like sketchbooking to be a way to kind of journal original, what you're seeing, rather than finished pages. And I'm almost done the sketchbook. I've got like the back page of this, and then I'm done the sketchbook. And my daughter Maisie was like, oh, I love that. I want to have that. I want to frame it and hang it up in my house. And it's like, well, it's in my sketchbook, hon. And she said, well, cut it out for me. And I'm like, I've got stuff on both sides. I'm not cutting this one apart. But in a lot of my sketchbooks, I only paint on one side of the page. So those would be perfect for cutting up. And it really depends on the paper. Like if it's a sketchbook I've made myself, I tend to want to use both sides of the paper because I'm using better paper and it can hold up and not wrinkle. But a lot of the sketchbooks I buy are like 90-pound weights, and so I find they cockle a bit, and so I only use one side. Or I might use one side for the main picture and then the other side to take notes, which again makes a nice spread. So if I'm doing the painting, say on the usually I'll do the painting on the right side of the spread every time, and I'll do notes on the left side. And I try to do that mainly because I'm not spending a lot of time pressing down on the pages that are previous in the book. And also I'm right-handed, so it's a little more comfortable to work that way. But with this one, I'm doing a 2-page spread, and I just really love how this is coming out. I'm going in with, I think it's a 0.4 nib, because I'm using it on its side to try a little bit so I can keep my hand out of the shot more for the tutorial version. But a lot of times if I'm not filming, I will be using my pen straight up and down to get the actual nib weight of the pen that I'm using. But when I'm filming, I try to go with a bigger nib and hold it at an angle so my hand's not completely covering what I'm doing. It's not always effective, I've got to say, but it works pretty well for that. And also on a textured page, I find working with a larger nib at an angle saves up the pens quite a bit. Now here I was kind of like debating what I wanted to do. I was thinking I might go in with chalk pastel pencils, but then I thought then I have to spray it with fixative, and I didn't want to bother with that, so I'm like, I'll use colored pencils. And I went in with my trusty Prismacolors. Now there are a lot of equivalent pencils you could use for this. Anything that's waxy and kind of opaque, like Derwent Chromaflow, Derwent Color Soft. A lot of the budget pencils, like the I guess I don't know if you want to call them budget, but like the Arteza or the Marco Tribute or Brute Fooner pastel pencils work really well. Anything that's kind of opaque and waxy works really well for this technique for putting highlights in. The reason why I tend to be using Prismacolor is because the pencils are colored, the barrel is all the way colored, so I can grab them really quickly when I'm filming. I don't think Prismacolors are the best pencils. I just think because the barrels are colored all the way, they're just easy for me to identify and grab. Versus like the Chromaflow or the Color Soft, which just have the little colors on the ends. So it's something to think about, honestly, when you're buying pencils. How do you identify them? How is your eyesight? Chromaflow has big print on black matte barrels, which is nice. So I will say that. I'm going to be demoing them at a trade show this weekend too. So I've been using them a lot lately, and they work beautifully. But it's, you get in habits. And I just know that when I'm working quickly like I do, when I'm filming, I want to be able to grab my pencils. Plus I have them as a decoration in my studio behind where I sit for my filming, so they look nice. So they're having the all brightly colored barrels sorted by color just is aesthetically pleasing in my studio. So it's a decoration that I actually use. But whatever you have, honestly, use whatever colored pencils you have is the moral of the story. And your wax-based pencils tend to be more opaque. So I'm meaning like a Chromaflow or a Color Soft or a Prismacolor versus, say, a Polychromos or an oil-based pencil. The Derwent Lightfast, I think, are oil-based, but they're quite opaque too, so those will work well. In a sketchbook, I'm not worrying about light fastness because, like I said, I'm not cutting this book up to hang it up, much to my daughter's disappointment. This is the sketchbook is the collection, is the whole work of art, in my opinion, for these handmade sketchbooks, because the paper's so good I want to use both sides. But anyway, something to consider when you're sketchbooking. But this pretty much does wrap up the piece. I did go in with this Derwent Colorless Blender. It's basically a marker that's got alcohol ink in it, and it lets you smooth out the graininess of the pencil, which you will see some graininess on the textured watercolor paper. And then I went in with my favorite white gel pen, which I think I found a replacement for it because they sold out when I recommended them. But I found a replacement pack that actually has different size nibs, which I think is even better because this 1mm one flows so fast and it's got so much ink that it's almost overkill in a lot of places. So this one that I'm going to link to has 6, 8, and 1mm, 0.6, 0.8, and 1mm sizes. So all that's in the video description, along with a link to Critique Club if you want to check this out and create along with me yourself. Thank you so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. And until next time, happy crafting. Bye.